3 songs featuring the vocals of Colin Blunstone. I Don't Believe in Miracles, She's Not There from the Zombies, and there's Colin Blunstone with his first big solo hit, Say You Don't Mind. And I'm delighted to be saying that I'm joined on the line by Colin Blunstone right now. Good morning.
Hi, Simon. How are you doing?
Very well. It really is a pleasure to speak to you, sir.
Well, likewise.
Now, I believe that you're just back from tour in the Netherlands this week.
That's right, yeah. We got back 2 or 3 days ago with my solo band, and it went very well. I love going to Holland. It's such a beautiful country. We had a really good time, and now we're back here, and we're going to do about another 7 or 8 dates in the UK, and I think we're actually coming up your way at one point.
Yes, you're on next Wednesday at the Robin 2 in Bilston, and I think it's a venue you've been to before.
Many times. It's one of my favourite venues. It's one of the best rock and roll clubs in the country. It's a really well run, very professional place, and I love playing there.
And I think you've played there as a solo artist and with the Zombies. Is that right?
I have, yes, absolutely. I think I first started playing there when I went back on the road in around 1997. So I've been playing there off and on for probably about 20 years.
Now, it all started with the Zombies at school in St Albans, didn't it?
It did. I went to St Albans Grammar School for my sins, and I met some guys also at school who wanted to be in a band, and I happened to have a guitar, and that was my audition. You got a guitar? You're in. and that's how I started. I started off as a rhythm guitarist in the band, and somehow, one way or another, I was kind of moved round, probably because I wasn't a particularly good guitarist. I ended up being the lead singer. But, I mean, things were fairly flexible in those days. You know, 1 minute you were rhythm guitarist, and the next minute you were the drummer.
Are you ever seen with a guitar on stage these days?
I haven't been for some time. I did used to play on stage, but I still write. Quite a lot of the songs that I record, sometimes with the Zombies, but quite a lot of the ones that I record myself. I do write the songs, but I'm a bit of an iffy player, to be honest, and to be absolutely honest, and I don't think it's going to come now. I keep telling myself, if I practice, I'll be good one day, but I think I've probably had my day by now as a guitarist.
And the tour, say, which reaches Bilston next week, amongst other dates, it actually features a date in your beloved St Albans, doesn't it?
It does. We actually end up at the arena in St Albans, where it all began all those years ago. My life changed in 1961. The Zombies first got together for our very first rehearsal, and ironically enough, this tour is going to end up in St Albans, so I'm sure there'll be lots of old pals turning out, old mates, and we'll have a bit of a party on that night, I think.
Now, it's very well documented that you and the band were extremely disappointed after the commercial failure, really, of your final album, which led to you splitting up. And you said that you were devastated when Care of Cell 44 wasn't a hit, and you really were quite devastated, weren't you?
Well, I was in a way. I mean, I think all artists are disappointed if they make an album which, I felt that with that album in particular, it was the best we could possibly do. And, you sit there and perhaps in the middle of the night thinking about it. Hold on a minute. That's the best we can possibly do. And it's been commercially a disaster. Now, do you think someone's trying to tell us something? And it worked out that everybody felt perhaps it was time we moved on to get involved in other projects, and it was a very amicable split. It just seemed there was an air of inevitability about it, really. But then, ironically, a couple of years after the album was released, a track from the album called Time of the Season was a huge hit in America, #1 in Cashbox, and I think #3 in Billboard, sold about 2 million copies. So everything sort of happened a bit out of kilter for the Zombies, really. And then by the time that Time of the Season was a huge hit, we were all involved in other projects, and it just wasn't possible. To be honest, we never even discussed it for 1 second, the band getting back together again. We've never been a band, really, that likes to look backwards. You know, even today with this incarnation of the Zombies, we write and record new material all the time. And although we'll play the old favourites like Time of the Season and She's Not There, or Say You Don't Mind, which you just played, we'll play those tunes because people like to hear them, and we love to play them. But we also always play new songs as well.
The interesting thing is now, is it true that you've done more work with the Zombies on album since you've sort of been back together again than you did originally?
Absolutely. It's bizarre. Professionally, the band was only together in the 60s from 64 to 67. This incarnation of the band, which wasn't called the Zombies to start with, we kind of arrived back at the Zombies after about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
We started in 1999, so we've been playing this time for 18 years, and I forget how many albums we've done. We've done 5 or 6 new albums, and then there've been a couple of live albums and a DVD and so on. So there's a lot more material that's been released from this incarnation of the band than from the original incarnation of the band.
And you spend a lot of time in the States these days, don't you? At least, 3 tours a year, I've heard.
Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've always gone 3 times a year to the States, but we also play in the Far East, all the way through Europe. In fact, the UK is probably one of the lesser common places for us to play, ironically, because we all live here. But we're just off to the States in about 2 weeks' time. We're going to start off playing in Jamaica, actually. Yeah. And then we go to the States, and we'll be going all over the States and all over Canada. It's quite a long and extensive tour.
Because you are revered in the States. I mean, you're revered the world over, but particularly in the States, what with Odyssey and Oracle, you're sort of been elevated to almost cult status, haven't you?
Well, it's difficult to talk about yourself in those terms, but I have to say there is an element of that, and particularly that album. It does seem to have become somewhat of an iconic album, and it's cited by so many people as an influence. You know, Tom Petty, Dave Grohl,
Paul Weller.
Many artists cite that as an influence. And also, we have the added advantage of being part of what they call the British invasion. Yes. Which people don't sort of talk about much over here, but it was a huge cultural explosion over there that suddenly their music world was being dominated by British bands, and we were a small part of that. Obviously, the Beatles and the Stones and, all the Who and the Kinks were the really big bands, but we were part of that.
Absolutely.
And so, that also adds to the mystery and intrigue about the Zombies.
Now, I've got to ask you something about Time of the Season that I've always wanted to know. And the breathy bits on Time of the Season, on the recording, was that just you, or was that the entire band mixed in?
I'll tell you, it was neither. It's just Rod.
Ah.
It's not me at all.
Right.
We were recording the record, and he said, I've got an idea for... a breathy bit and a hand clap, and you just went in and did it, so it's all Rod. Yes. I shouldn't admit that, should I? I should have told you. No,
because I was looking at your performances on YouTube of recent years, and it seems that during the concerts you all join in on the breathy bit.
Oh, yeah, nowadays we all do it. We all want the glory, are you kidding?
And even you join in just before you have to cut back into the verse.
I know, it's a bit tricky, but I don't want to be left out. I mean, that's the most interesting part of the show. I want to be featured when we're doing the sort of the starring role,
Yeah, it was such an unusual sound to create. How did you come across that? So Rod just had the idea in the studio, did he?
Yeah, I mean, he's a really original thinker with music, He's always coming up with new ideas, and particularly in that album, because we were using the equivalent of 8 tracks for the first time. We just walked into the studios here at Abbey Road, when the Beatles had just walked out, having done Sgt. Pepper. Wow. And they'd brought in quite a few innovations, and one of the things was, until then in this country, everyone was just recording on 4-track machines, so you only had 4 separate tracks that you could use to record, but they'd managed to, in a technical way, lash 2 4-tracks together. Probably not the technical term, but they put 2 4-tracks together And although you lost one track in the process of putting those two machines together, you ended up with, in effect, 7 tracks. And so we were used to recording on 4 tracks. We would get the basic tracks down, and then whoever came up with an idea, which was in our band was very often Rod, it was just so exciting that suddenly we could add things which we could never do up until that point. It all had to be recorded at the same time. It gave us a chance to put extra harmonies on and to put little effects like that on Time of the Season. With the benefit of hindsight, without that effect, Time of the Season may never have been a hit. It would be a totally different song.
And of course, the Rod you're speaking of is Rod Argent, who of course later on went on to be in the band Argent. And I know that through looking through some of your set lists with the Zombies, you actually do a couple of Argent songs on stage, don't you? We do.
We vary it, but we very often do Hold Your Head Up, because people really like that. It's a great song.
It's such a great song.
And then we'll often do God Gave Rock and Roll to You, another brilliant song. But over the years we've done other Argent songs as well, and I think they were a magical band. I was genuinely a fan of Argent.
It's Only Money, there's a good track.
Yes, another great one. No, we haven't done that, but that might be one for the future.
I must say, I first came across you consciously when I was a great vinyl collector in the 70s, and I came across a copy of your single Wonderful, which is just a superb song. Actually, I know you still do in concert, don't you? How did that song come together? That was written by Rod and Chris, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, at that period, they were crediting their songs with both their names. In the 60s, their credits were either for Rod or for Chris. And they went through a period of co-crediting. But actually, Chris White wrote that song. And it was a big hit in Europe. Unfortunately, in the UK, then, they only had a top 40. And it got just outside the top 40. It didn't quite make the top 40. So if you look in the Guinness Book of Records, you won't see it as a hit record. But in Europe, it certainly was a hit.
I remember Radio 1 played it an awful lot, didn't they?
No, I think they did, actually. I used to be really fortunate with airplay around that time. Especially Radio 1 used to play a lot of my stuff, probably more than you would think if you look back and look at the actual hits that I had. But I think, radio is so important. I just want to butter you up a bit here. It is so important for artists, and if you're played on the radio, it just makes such a difference to your career.
And let's mention a bit about your work with the Alan Parsons Project, and particularly your performance on the track Old and Wise. Now, that song is almost like perfectly made for you. It just shows off your vocals completely, doesn't it? And you still do that one live, don't you?
We do, yeah. Again, that's another song that was a huge hit in Europe. It was a small hit in the UK. It intrigues me how different songs are hits in different territories. So you can go to one country, they won't know any of the hits that you had in England or in the UK. They won't know any of those hits. They'll know completely different things. And Old and Wise is, for instance, we've just come back from Holland. That would have been the biggest song that we played in the night.
I got taste.
Old and Wise.
Yes. Got real taste.
Well, I think it's a really beautiful song. I think it's gorgeous. Obviously, I didn't write it, but I did sing it.
And you've also worked with other people who have worked with the Alan Parsons Project. You worked with a band called Keats, didn't you? Yeah,
and that came about with Alan Parsons had a silent partner called Eric Wolfson, who wrote a lot of the songs, and he was an ideas man and a businessman, and he got the idea of forming a band from the guys who played in the Alan Parsons Project most, because there was a bit of a turnover of whoever was playing, and they approached me to be the singer in that band.
And that was two of the guys who were in Pilot, wasn't it?
That's right, Ian Benson and Davey Payton, yeah.
Now, I've got to ask you, years after your version of She's Not There, Santana had a hit version in 1977. I want to know what Colin Blunstone thought of the Santana cover version of She's Not There.
Oh, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought it's fantastic. And apart from the fact that it's a fantastic record, it's wonderful for us as well to be covered by an artist of that stature. And incidentally, when we tour in America next month, there's going to be a big sort of glossy book. I think you would call it like a coffee table book. and it'll be a history of the Zombies, but it's just got lots and lots of quotes from the world's leading musicians. And Carlos Santana, he's written a quote in there about the Zombies, and it's very complimentary. So it's lovely when you see things like that he appreciated covering the song, and I can tell you that all the guys in the Zombies were absolutely thrilled that they chose to cover it as well.
Because he added completely new bits, really, to the framework of the old song, didn't he, really?
He did. It is quite different. I remember going to Holland and doing some huge concerts. Sting was headlining, and it was 20,000 people a night. It was on TV. It was recorded. It was a massive thing. And for some reason, they asked me to sing She's Not There, but the Santana version.
Really?
And I was so worried that I knew the Zombies version so well that I'd go off in the wrong arrangement. And there was an orchestra as well as a band. So the orchestra, obviously, they're reading their parts.
How did the guitarist feel?
I think he probably was a bit intimidated, but he managed to do it okay. But the thing is that when you've got strings and they're reading parts, they won't follow me. If I go wrong, they'll still play what's in front of them. So I did feel a little bit on edge that I had to do the other version. I don't know why they asked me to do that. I mean, it was great to do it, but I just found it a bit intimidating.
How did you came across the old Denny Lane single, Say You Don't Mind, didn't you? And you did a new version of it. How did you come into contact with that song?
Well, in the original Zombies, and remember we finished in 1967, we just found Denny's record. I don't think it was ever a hit, but we loved it so much. We actually played it in the original Zombies. We just played a cover of it when we played live. And then when I came to make my first solo album, which Rod Argent and Chris White produced from the original Zombies, we thought, what about that fantastic Denny Lane song? Maybe we could have a go at that. And then someone, and actually everyone claims it was their idea, so I can't tell you who it was, but someone came up with the idea of, why don't we do this with strings? Why don't we do it in a completely different way?
It had a bit of an Eleanor Rigby feel about it, didn't it?
It does, yes, you're right, it does. And we approached a wonderful string arranger called Chris Gunning, and he put that arrangement together. It's a 21-piece string orchestra. It's just strings, but it really chugs along.
Yes.
And you almost have to stop and think, there's no drums on this. There's no electric instruments. It's all just strings, but it really moves, you know.
Always the mark of a good song when there's no drum, because it's pure melody, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the 80s, you teamed up with Dave Stewart, not the Dave Stewart of Eurythmics fame, with a hit version of What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, and that was a nice excursion for you, wasn't it? It was. Every now and again, I get these magical little trips into sort of other people's careers as a sort of a guest vocalist, and Dave Stewart, he's a genius of keyboards. You know, he's fantastic, and he just knew someone who came from Hatfield, where I come from. Yeah. And he'd recorded this track, and he was asking for suggestions of who should sing on this track, and this person actually was Barbara Gaskin, who he went on to record with. Yep. After he recorded with me, and she comes from Hatfield too, and she said, why didn't you get hold of Colin Blunstone to sing it? So it's all just chance, you know, it's just chance conversations that lead to these projects. And that really worked, didn't it? And I think it worked really well, yeah. Now, the concert next Wednesday night, what can the audience say? There's a couple of Zombies tracks in there, maybe? I think there will be, yes, a couple of Zombies tracks, a little bit of Alan Parsons, all my hits, and we're also introducing some new songs as well. So there'll be 2 or 3 brand new songs. Every time we go on tour, we try to bring in some new songs, and we certainly will do that when we play at the Robin. So I'd like to think there's something there for everyone, and it'll be a really good night, and I think anyone who comes along is going to have a great time. And you're preparing a new album, I believe. I'm just beginning, yes. We've got about 3 backing tracks and 1 master vocal. Yeah. So we're right at the beginning, but I would hope to have that finished by the end of the year to be released early next year. in between all that zombie activity.
I know, it's trying to find the time. If anyone had told me that at this time in my life I would be running around the world doing all this work, I would never, ever have believed them. But, I'm really enjoying it. I'm doing more now than I was doing when I was 19, and I'm just having a great time.
And can zombie fans look forward to another album?
Oh, I'm sure, absolutely. I mean, I think Rod's got a couple of tunes on the go at the moment. So thinking ahead, I would think perhaps the end of next year or something like that. There'll definitely be another album, yeah.
I was looking at one of those videos on YouTube of you performing recently, and you were in a bike shop in Seattle. Was it really a bike shop?
If it was a bike shop, the chances are it was in Texas. Where they do South by Southwest. I've forgotten the name of the town now. It's not Houston, but anyway, it's in Texas. And they have this huge festival where they close the city for 3 days and just bands, thousands and thousands of bands play. And I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, the so-and-so bicycle shop, what a great name for a club." And I said, "No, it's not a club. We're playing in a bicycle shop."
Wow.
And that's what happens at South by Southwest. Yeah. There's music everywhere, and you end up playing in the most unlikely places. It was great fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it.
And speaking of possibly unlikely places, I note your tour itinerary tonight, you're playing a church.
We are indeed. I quite enjoy playing in churches, but normally we would be doing an acoustic set in a church, so it will probably be a little bit challenging because obviously churches, from a musical point of view, they've been designed for acoustic music, so there'll be quite a long delay on every note we play, and we have to be really careful and try and play within ourselves so that we just don't drown people out with noise and reverb and everything. So we'll have to be on our toes a bit, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Great. As I say, you're in Bilston in Wolverhampton next Wednesday at the Robin 2, and I believe tickets are available.
Yep, I'm sure they are, and I just hope that all of your listeners will come down and join us, and we'll have a fantastic time.
That's great. Okay, Colin Blunstone, it has been terrific to talk to you, and lots of luck with the tour and future projects.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you very much indeed.